Wow. Time really flies, huh? It's Wednesday, and it's time for another episode of Positive Reinforcement. With your host, Jonathan Reinforce Larson, the podcast where I give the Overwatch community a treat. I've really committed to that line now. I really committed to the whole giving a treat thing because of Positive Reinforcement. I'm so proud of that pun, and I'm really excited to be talking to y'all once again on the Positive Reinforcement podcast. It's so fun to give analysis. It's so much fun. Today I spent my day at the Overwatch League office. I was doing my paperwork going into this weekend's games, where basically I work on like a research document essentially, where I write up some information, storylines, news, all that kind of stuff, prep a bit for talent, etc. And then I made myself back home to my apartment, feeling ready to go with another episode of Positive Reinforcements. And it's just so much fun to give analysis, so much fun to talk about the Overwatch League. So I'm so excited. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Positive Reinforcement. And let's get into it. What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? We got another week of games coming up. And there's quite a lot of fun games coming up this week, actually. We're starting to get into the stage playoff territory, where we can start seeing teams qualify and I guess fail to qualify. Fail to qualify for the stage playoffs. And so things are getting exciting. You can see how the matches are starting to matter so far in stage 1. So, really exciting week ahead of us, with lots of analysis to give, lots of opinions, lots of thoughts. We're starting to see the colors of the team start to shine as well. We can see how some teams are failing to improve from last season. Some teams are surprisingly good, and others are just sort of in between, of course. So we're starting to see some color to these teams, which is really exciting to talk about and to analyze and to see where they're really at. So let's get into it. Let's get into the schedule. Still don't have any tunes, but I'm just so excited. I'm just gonna start. Let's just get a quick harmonica tune out. There we go. Quick tune before we get into the schedule. Schedule time. Let's go. Thursday. Wait, I gotta do my British accent. What date is it? It's 29. Thursday, February 29th. We got Washington Justice taking on the Philadelphia Fusion at 4 p.m. As a bit of a starter, a bit of an appetizer. We went into the last episode where I started comparing everything and everyone to a nice dinner. And so I guess we're starting up with a nice appetizer here. Washington Justice taking on a Philadelphia Fusion that doesn't look too good. We got Seoul Dynasty taking on the Boston Uprising, 5:30 p.m. PST. That's expected to go live. That could be a really good matchup. Actually. Especially because Boston Uprising, they have Fusions back in the lineup. Their GM, Huck, Mr. President, tweeted out that they've signed Fusions now to a proper contract. I don't know what the exact wording, so don't quote me on this. I'm a professional and all, but don't quote me. That Fusions is available to play after Axiom had to sub in for last week's game versus Shanghai Dragons. Didn't go too well, and suddenly Boston Uprising decided, well, we'll probably spend some money so we can start beating teams again. So here they are, with Fusions probably going to start. I mean, why would you sign him otherwise? Versus this Seoul Dynasty team that has... I like this Seoul Dynasty team. They haven't looked the best, but I still like them. I still enjoy watching them because they have Fisher on the main tank role, and Mitchell has really impressed me as a great Sombra and a great Diva. So it's fun to watch this team. I'm a good friend with Jexe. Jexe and me, we usually play some rank together, play some duo. He's a very enthusiastic shot caller. There's a couple of shot callers that just sort of hate being the leader, sort of just like despise always having to be the one talking, repeating the same ultimates are up, etc. The same. Because if you're a shot caller, you sort of have to repeat the same calls over and over again every map. It's just like, oh, take the high ground, oh, regroup, go to this position, start contesting the payload. It's sort of like those boring calls, and then you obviously have some exciting on the fly adaptation calls. But Jexay, he strikes me as this really enthusiastic individual. So I can queue into a ranked game at like midnight on 12 p.m. and he's just like, we get the Genji, come on team, we go, we win, let's go team, pop the Nano Blade, we have Nano Blade, go, That's sort of like Jexay in a nutshell to me. Not really, not 100% spot on, but that's sort of what Jexay is to me. And I certainly don't think he's adopted the Mickey personality in game, because I think that sort of sounded like Mickey in one way or another. And so he's not always that positive, perhaps, but he's sort of that enthusiastic about his shot calling. And so I like watching Jexay as well. He's a fun guy. I enjoy him. So you got Fisher, Jexay, Mitchell, Ri Johong, and the flex support. Seoul Dynasty is a very likable team. I enjoy watching this team. But they're going up against the Boston Uprising with Fusions back on the main tank role. We'll see if Colorex continues to play this Zarya. I can just imagine that he does just that, because he is the DPS player, and I think that's sort of expected of him to do that, despite Axiom. There was some information going around that Axiom was also doing some shot calling on Zarya while Colorex was suspended. But Colorex is back, and I expect him to be back on the Zarya duty to put in some damage. Axiom's stats did not look good on Zarya when he had to fill in. Let me just tell you, those stats were pretty awful. So Colorex can't realistically do much worse, except that they lost to the Shanghai Dragons. But anyway, we'll disregard that. So I do think that Boston Uprising with Fusions back, they're so good. And from what we've seen from the Seoul Dynasty, they're so questionable at times. Let's see who did Seoul play last week. I know they beat Chengdu very convincingly, but that doesn't really count, because Chengdu is they're their own entity. Seoul Dynasty, did they only play? Yeah, they only played one game last week. And based off that we've only really seen Seoul perform versus Chengdu, and when Fisher decided to pop off, I think I have to predict the Boston Uprising to win this one, because even though I'm really excited to see Mitchell on this Sombra, and I think he can have a great impact, and Seoul Dynasty is very likable to me as a team, I do think that Boston Uprising will win this in the end by sheer consistency on a triple tank, triple support composition. And with Fusions back in the lineup, with his understanding, I think he'll probably provide some great shot calling as well when it comes to avoiding some of Mitchell's CMPs, and perhaps give Boston Uprising a bit of a boon moving forward in this matchup. So I have to predict the Boston Uprising. I'm gonna go with 3-1, because I could see Seoul Dynasty taking a map based on their great use of Sombra, and I know that Boston Uprising struggled with the Shanghai. I think that is Seoul's greatest thing going for them. The fact that Boston Uprising struggled with Shanghai last week, when was it Ding? Yeah, it was Ding who played the Sombra for Shanghai last week, and he just ripped Boston Uprising a new one, really. So Seoul Dynasty has that going for them. If Mitchell performs really well on the Sombra, I could see them beating the Boston Uprising. But based on the fact that Fusions is back, I feel that Boston Uprising, despite losing to Shanghai, they might build some momentum with Fusions back in the lineup, some positive notes to take from that. And so I feel that Boston Uprising are going to win this match 3-1. Moving on, we have Florida Mayhem taking on the Guangzhou Charge. 6 p.m. PST. If you're in Europe, that's like 3 in the morning. Enjoy. No, it's actually 7 p.m. PST. So, I guess that's 4 a.m. in the morning if you're in Europe. Enjoy. We got San Francisco Shock taking on the Hangzhou Spark. This is a pretty interesting matchup. This could, after Hangzhou's problems last week, I really do think that San Francisco Shock should have no problems taking this one. Hangzhou Spark, they looked so lost versus the Houston Outlaws and the London Spitfire last week. A lot of people are hyping up London Spitfire because they did beat Hangzhou Spark. But then again, you have to remember the Hangzhou Spark also lost to the Houston Outlaws just like a few days prior. So I don't know what to make of that either. I don't know how much to hype up the London Spitfire best in that win. They certainly did look a lot better according to the eye test. Gesture was on point with the Winston, and Profit on the Zarya was really good. But Hangzhou Spark, they have their own problems, and so we can't really assess them at the moment. We don't really know where they are at. So this is going to be an interesting matchup, but I I do imagine San Francisco is going to take this one. Could even be a 4-0, but in this meta, who knows? Why am I even making predictions anyway? Why am I doing this podcast? You can't do predictions in this meta. Everyone's getting screwed over. We got Friday, March 21st. We got the LA Gladiators taking on the London Spitfire. We got Toronto Defiant taking on the New York Excelsior. Vancouver Titans taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. And this is bait. This is bait. This is all bait. One thinks this is going to be a close matchup, judging from Los Angeles Valiant last year. But they're so awful. They've already gone 0-3 so far this season. And it's an oof. It's very much an oof. I mean, they have no chance versus Vancouver Titans. Why even bother trying to do analysis? Shanghai Dragons take on the Chengdu Hunters, and I do think Shanghai Dragons are going to win this matchup as well. As previously mentioned, Ding's Sombra, I think is going to be very good for Shanghai Dragons in this matchup, because even though Chengdu Hunters, they play a bit of a unique play style, you don't really know how to play versus them, because obviously these teams don't get really practice time against them. You can only really judge from Overwatch League VODs. But with Shanghai Dragons having such a fantastic Sombra at their disposal, I don't think Among is going to have a lot of impact on the Wrecking Ball. And then Shanghai Dragons, they're a bit underrated. With Gamsu in the lineup, they certainly looked a lot better, because a proper main tank is probably better than off tanks. Trying to adjust to an main tank role. Shout out to Taimu. So I think Shanghai Dragons will take this matchup. Could even be a 4-0 like the Seoul Dynasty last week. Could be a 3-1 depending if Chengdu Hunters pull out some weird wonky strat and Shanghai aren't ready for it. I forgot the date. I forgot the date on that day. Anyway. Saturday, March 2nd. Almost said. Yeah, never mind. Paris Eternal takes on the Atlanta Reign. That's an early matchup. Remember, we have early weekends. That's 12 p.m. PST. If you're in Europe, you can watch. It's only at 9 p.m. Paris Eternal takes on the Atlanta Reign. And, I mean, this is a pretty good matchup, honestly. Paris Eternal, I don't really know where I have these guys yet. They've only played 2 matches. And they actually barely lost. That's the way I like to put it. They barely lost versus the LA Gladiators last week, when they ended up winning the series 2-1. But it really did come down to the very last team fight. And so, not quite sure where I rank Paris Eternal right now. A lot of people are hyping them up to be one of the strongest GOATS teams, to be so strong at this triple tank, triple support composition. They certainly have the tactics down. Do they have the individual skill to compare to other teams? I think that Benbest have a few things to improve on, but because Paris Eternal's strategy and tactics and overall approach, the fact that they're so aggressive and they're so good at being this aggressive, I think they make all the individual players stand out just a little bit more. And so Benbest looks good in this strategy and tactics so far. But if I were to throw out a comparison, say Benbest to Mono, I mean, they're not quite there yet. Paris Eternal has only played 2 games, and if they keep on showing us some victories, maybe Benbest will actually be in that discussion. But until then, I don't really know where to rank Paris Eternal. I mean, we had Finzi, who was on the bench for the LA Valiant last year, and to be fair, he was on the bench second to Space, who obviously in his own right is a fantastic off-tank. But how much has Finzi really grown from this year spent on the LA Valiant bench, and then some contenders, I can imagine? Don't quote me on that. How much has he really grown from that as a player? And does this mean immediately that he's one of the best off-tanks in the league, because Paris Eternal is so good in this meta? You know, those are some questions that remain to be answered, and I think me, unlike some others, I'm a bit more conservative, in for a better word, in really going out on a limb and saying or predicting how good Paris Eternal are, because I still have a few question marks. They've only played 2 games so far. Versus Atlanta, I think it's going to be another win. They're going to be up 3-0 in matches. And they'll certainly probably be in the stage playoffs as well. But I'd like to see more from this team before I properly go out there and, start throwing out opinions that they're one of the top 3 teams in the league, etc. I still think, especially because they didn't win that convincingly versus the Gladiators last week. And so I have my concerns. I do have my concerns, but nonetheless, we'll see what they have to offer these coming couple of matches. So yes, I think they'll beat the Atlanta Reign. I think they just have a better understanding of the triple tank, triple support meta. And Atlanta Reign, I don't really think they can keep up. Pogbo has had some moments of brilliance on the Reinhardt, but he's also had some terrible games where he just can't land a single Earth Shatter. So it's a bit of a hit and miss for this Atlanta team. Dafran, statistically, is just a middle-of-the-pack Zarya. I like that people like to hype him up as one of the best players in the league whatsoever because he's so successful. I love the guy as well. So fun to be around, so fun to talk to, etc. But statistically, I think he's like bottom 5 in average energy on Zarya. He has pretty good gravitons where they get a lot of value from those. But overall, Dafran is honestly just another middle-of-the-pack Zarya. And so you're looking at Atlanta Reign in this matchup versus Paris, and you're wondering where is this win going to really come from. Kodak and Dogman, they're alternating playtime, and I think both of them in their own right are, they're doing their part, so to speak. Masa is I don't want to say, do I want to say fantastic? I don't really think I want to say fantastic, but he's a really good Lucio as well. And so they have some good players on this Atlanta Reign team, but do I think they can stand up against the Paris Eternal? No, I don't think they can. So Paris is going to win this match probably even more convincingly than they beat the LA Gladiators. Florida Mayhem takes on the Houston Outlaws, and I mean, that's going to be interesting matchup. San Francisco Shock takes on the Washington Justice. That's for 3 p.m. PST. And finally, on Saturday, Shanghai Dragons take on the Dallas Fuel. Another interesting matchup because I think these teams are relatively even. I think Shanghai Dragons are the favorite in this matchup. I think they have a bit more individual skill to rely on. I think they are a bit more calm and collected, and I think they really proved in their match versus the Boston Uprising that they've sort of nailed the teamwork. Certainly it helps the fact that the core lineup of the Shanghai Dragons team are 4 players from Kong Du Panthera, I'd like to say. I should probably double check this so that there won't pop up a lot of Reddit threads about, 4 players from the Kong Du Panthera. So good teamwork. Shanghai Dragons. Liquipedia. I am my own producer and fact checker, and I guess I can label myself as a audio producer as well. So exciting stuff on this podcast. They have DM Ding. That's 2. Young Jin. Luffy, Coma. Let's see, how many are there? There's DM Lucky Future Zenith. So we got Ding from Kong the Panthera, Young Jin, Luffy, and Coma. That's right. So there's 4 members from a Kong the Panthera roster. Young Jin doesn't always see play, of course. But then again, I think that's a good reason as to why Shanghai Dragons has such good teamwork already so early into the season. I think we really saw that versus the Boston Uprising last week. And I think Gamsu really fit well into this team because he is more of a conservative, passive Winston. I've always, since 2016, I've always branded Winstons as aggressive or passive. And I don't think there's a better or worse. It just depends on how your team is playing. I think that usually aggressive Winstons, they get a lot more value if executed perfectly. And if their playstyle backs it up. I mean, if you throw out names like Gesture and Bumper in that conversation. I wouldn't really say that Miro, when he was... Would I say that Miro was an aggressive Winston? Miro was just unique in his own way because he was always on your back line, but he never really... I guess he was an aggressive Winston, yeah. It was weird. Yeah, I think I think Miro was an aggressive Winston because he was always sort of on your back line, had great positioning, but he got so pocketed, and that created so much space for his team. So I will say he was an aggressive Winston in his own right, but he was a bit more of a flanker, sort of, almost, style. It was very unique for this day and age. I don't know how I came into this kind of Miro, but yeah, that was a sight to see. I think if you're a viewer that's more interested in this sort of topic, I think you could look at players like Fischer and Gesture, and I think you'll both realize that they're fairly aggressive, both of them, but they have very different playstyles in that Fischer is a bit more straightforward, while Gesture does a bit more flanking, etc. So you can compare those two if you'd like to know a bit more about how playstyles work on Winston and how they interact with their team dynamics. But talking about Gamsu, a bit more passive, I don't think that's necessarily anything wrong in that. I think he does a great job at facilitating space for his DPS and making sure that this Kongdu Panthera core really gets great value from their teamwork and their individual skill. So I think that Shanghai Dragons have the upper hand based on that versus the Dallas Fuel, who look a bit discombobulated at the moment. Effect seems to have been benched somewhat. He came in for one map on Horizon Lunar Colony last week, but apart from that, it was mostly AKM and Zachary who played. And Dallas Fuel looked good, honestly, when those players were in the game. So we'll see how this Dallas Fuel lineup perform this week, and I think we'll have a better understanding of where they're really at after this match versus the Shanghai Dragons. But I still think that the Shanghai Dragons are favorites, and if Shanghai Dragons ends up winning in 5 maps, or even winning say 3-1, I think that there's could be some positive notes to take from Dallas Fuel to see if they're meshing better as a team and figuring out their own problems. Sunday, March 3rd. We got Boston Uprising taking on the Toronto Defiant. Hangzhou Spark versus the Los Angeles Gladiators. Gonna be a good one. Los Angeles Valiant takes on the Guangzhou Charge. And finally, New York Excelsior versus Seoul Dynasty. That's one heck of a matchup, New York Excelsior Seoul Dynasty. It might not even be even. Excelsior might just go out there and pull out a 4-0 sweep, honestly. But you always love to follow the Ri Jahong Jonak storyline, really, where Ri Jahong used to be the best flex support in the world for a time. I don't know exact time, but it was late 2016 to maybe late 2017, early 2018, etc. If you ask Sideshow, he'll spend 6 hours on the topic and give you the correct answer. I'm just for now going to assume that Ri Jahong was considered the best flex support late 2016 to early 2018. And then obviously Jonak came in last season as a rookie into the Overwatch League, got picked up by this LW Blue sort of core that now is the New York Excelsior, and he just surprised everyone. He just shocked the world, honestly, by how good he was. And so now we're in a scenario where last season Jonak earned league MVP honors, and he looked up to Ri Jahong for so long, and now they're facing off against each other in the Overwatch League. So that's such an interesting storyline to follow, and I'm really looking forward to see what this game has in store for us, even though I think Excelsior might just go ahead and win 4-0. So let's get to our match of the week. Our match of the week this week, anyway, it's not one that people might expect. It's not really between two teams that I think are considered top 3 in the league by a lot of people, but my match of the week that I'm the most excited for is the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the London Spitfire. Friday, March 1st, 4 p.m. PST. If you're in Europe, that's 1 a.m. So you do have time. Skip some sleep so you can catch this game. I think this is going to be an incredible game because the London Spitfire, they look better when Gesture gets to play a bit more Reinhardt. No, that's the most false statement I've ever said on this podcast. Gesture looks a bit better when he gets to play a bit more Winston. And now, obviously, they put Profit onto the Zarya, Guard, fits into that Brigitte role a bit more. And Lona Spitfire, they look a lot better judging from last week when they went 2-0. They're on the up and up, but they have to take on the Los Angeles Gladiators. The Los Angeles Gladiators, which people are still sleeping on. People are still sleeping on this Los Angeles Gladiators team. And would I say it frustrates me? Not really. That's a very aggressive term. It sort of irks me. Irks me. Yeah, that's a good term. It sort of irks me a bit that people are still sleeping on the Los Angeles Gladiators. This is such a talented team. We've already seen how good Big Goose and Chaz are in the back line. We've seen how good Surfer and Hydration are when it comes to great hero pools, great coachable players. Void now subbing in, known as one of the best. I think he was known for being one of the best divas way back before the Overwatch League. Or should have been Zarya? It was either Zarya or Diva. They've added Roar this season, who hasn't really performed up to expectations, but now Decay is finally available for this team to use. It is today, actually, Decay's 18th birthday, the 27th of February. And so finally, we're going to see the full potential of this team, which I think is going to have such a huge impact on this league. I think they for sure will be in a couple of stage grand finals. And then it's just a question of to see how good they really will be down the line in the season playoffs, because this is such a powerhouse. You have such a strong backline. You have Decay coming in, who's one of the hottest, if not the hottest prodigy in the entire world. I mean, this dude is out of this world. And really, it just comes down to Roar, in my opinion, to perform better on the Reinhardt, and this could be a insane powerhouse. Adding Decay to their lineup also will help this team when it comes to shot calling, hopefully. I think that if you have some more better communication, perhaps, with your Reinhardt and some of the utility in the team, I think that's going to help Roar perform better as well. I've been a bit low on Roar as of recent. I sent out some tweets saying what I think about him. After this podcast is done recording, I'm actually going to go on a stream with Sideshow and review some of the LA Gladiators gameplay and see what they're all about. But I'm so bullish on this team, and I'm so much looking forward to see what they have to offer when Decay finally joins this team in game, to see how they start to perform. But this is my match of the week. Who is going to win this one? Oh, I think the Los Angeles Gladiators are going to win. I think Lona Spitfire, no way do they win this matchup when Decay comes into the roster. I think the LA Gladiators are going to win this one 3-1. And hopefully, after this match, people will start to realize just how good the LA Gladiators are. And how scary they can be moving into the stage playoffs and season playoffs, which I for sure think they are going to be a part of. Anyway, that's my analysis for this week's games. But before we leave, let's do some Q&A questions. Some Q&A questions before I leave. So starting off this week, we got a question from Ampharos on Twitter. Which team do you think will be the most improved by a meta change, and why? Well, Lona Spitfire is certainly up there, because Lona Spitfire obviously has shown that they're not really good at all on this triple tank, triple support composition. I think they have so many talented players that when Gesture can finally just 100% play the Winston all the time, you have Fury playing the Diva, Prophet doing whatever he wants, and maybe Birdring, again, stepping in to fill some of the DPS duties. I still think that this roster has so much to offer in terms of talent, so a meta shift will do them greatly. Another team that I will throw out there is Hangzhou Spark. I know people are a bit bearish, a bit low on them after their 0-2 week, taking losses to the Houston Outlaws and the Lona Spitfire. But I think if a meta shift comes in here and you start seeing Gushui on the Winston more consistently, and you start to see Godsby and the Bazzi on the Tracer a bit more, I really do think that this team is a team to be reckoned with as well. So I'm looking out for those teams to really start performing if we see a meta shift. And then there might be some other team that I'm not really thinking about. Guangzhou Charge could honestly be quite good because they're just playing dive compositions as of now, but they're already impressing. So I already think the Hangzhou Spark as well as the London Spitfire will be the two teams to look out for if we get a big meta shift, which obviously would be more dive or perhaps a bit more bunker or Risa oriented. So look out for those. Look out for those 2 teams. Also a reminder, if you want to submit your own Q&A questions, make sure to tweet at me, @Reinforce, with the hashtag AskReinforce. And I will be able to take your questions for the next podcast. Another question from Lindley Trublo. Why do you think Effect has been having so many problems despite his improved mental health? Well, first and foremost, I think that some of it might have to do with the fact that he's still playing Zarya. I don't really know how much experience he had playing at a triple tank, triple support composition prior to this meta, or this meta I shouldn't say. Well, obviously a lot of the context here being that a lot of the contenders teams, they had a lot of experience playing triple tank, triple support in competition earlier last year. And so a lot of these Overwatch League teams are trying to catch up to that practice, which they missed out on during the offseason. So I don't know how much experience the Effect really have playing in this meta, and that means that his projected barriers on Zarya could become a huge issue for this team. So that might be part of it. I think if we go back to where he can play a lot of Tracer again, a lot of Widowmaker again, I think he'll be fantastic in that regard. And also, some of it could just be like shot calling aspects. Like OG has been having some troubles on stage so far. We saw that Anko tweeted out after their win that his confidence is back, and I think that was very much hinting towards OG and his confidence on stage. So we could look out for that being a result of Dallas Fuel improving as well. So I think there's nothing really wrong per se with Effect. This might just not be the meta with him, but we'll see moving on in other metas if he still is able to perform in perhaps a bit more dive-oriented meta, etc. Also, another question from our Owl Insider, Emily. Would you rather be the best player on a team that always loses, or worst player on a team that always wins? This is actually a very easy question for me to answer. I would be the worst player on a team that always wins. And the reason being is that I've been on a lot of teams that have lost. And it's not fun to lose. It is not fun to lose. So while it's always fun to perhaps be the best player on a team, to rack in all of those highlights and to be praised on social media, Reddit, to get a lot of attention that way, that doesn't really matter when in the big picture you end up losing all the time. And so with that, I think you would take such a big toll on your mental health that I think if I always ended up losing despite performing so well, it would ruin me. So I'm gonna say worst player on a team that always wins. And I mean, I've sort of been in that position before. I mean, when Rogue was so dominant in late 2016, I'm not gonna say so dominant because of course we lost a map 5 to Misfits during A-League, and I think if we had won that map, if we had advanced to the grand finals, there's no doubt in my mind we would have beaten Envious and the history of the game, honestly. And all those team solid traits, etc., could look very different. So that game 5 had a lot of impact on how everything turned out in the scene, etc. And I don't think that Rogue would have split up if we had won that map 5. That's how much that map 5 mattered. But back then, it really did feel like I was the worst player on that team, who was the best team in the world. And so that was one of the biggest moments in my life, because I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about appreciating what you have, if that makes sense. I think I was on the best team in the world, and there was a bit of hysteria going on about our success and how dominant, and a bit of narcissism going on. But I think following that whole drama and the end to that story, I think that I learned so much about myself, appreciating for what you have, and maybe a few regrets. But I don't like saying I regret things. But looking back, things could have been very different with very small details. So I'd rather be the worst player on a team that always wins, and especially in this day and age, with the lessons I've learned, with the perspective I have, I think I would be able to ignore the criticism in a much better way and really enjoy what matters most, which is winning. So anyway, on that note, I think we're done with this week's podcast. We'll see. I'm trying to get some guests on. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, because I sort of enjoy just talking to myself while we're at it, talking about narcissism, etc. But I do want some guests on to just give their perspective of the teams as well, and I think that a lot of my listeners would appreciate having some guests on as well to talk about, give a different perspective as well to some of these teams and what they have in store. But anyway, that's going to be the end of episode 3 of Positive Reinforcement. Once again, thank you all for tuning in, making this a thing, because if no one listened, I wouldn't be recording it. Or perhaps I just yell analysis to my saying because I need an outlet. If you want to support me, make sure to go to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/reinforce. You can subscribe or donate. If you donate, please leave a little note saying I donated because of the podcast, because that gives me puts me in a good mood. It really does put me in a good mood. It gives me a bit of a positive boost going into these podcasts. It's always nice to feel supported. So thank you so much, guys, for the support. Tweet at me at Reinforce, #AskReinforce if you have any questions. And I'll see you in the next episode on Sunday, talking about all the results and all the matches. And I'll see you then. Take care. Enjoy some Overwatch.